Hi everybody, it's Higher Power Historian, and I wanted to make a part 2 to my video on Iphigenia and Artemis. So if you haven't watched that yet, the link is in the description. Be sure to check it out first. In that video, I talked about how Artemis intervened at the right moment to save Iphigenia from being murdered at her wedding altar. I discussed how it didn't matter whether anybody else involved in the situation, including the entire Greek army, understood that Iphigenia survived because the person it mattered for was Iphigenia. And this ability to suddenly offer survival to one person in the right moment, regardless of anyone else or anything else in the picture, is a power we all have and enables us to embody Artemis, to enact the power of the divine. Yet there's another aspect to this story that I want to cover now. You probably can't help but think of the greater horror, the disrespect of women that underlies the entire thing. Okay, Iphigenia was rescued at the 11th hour, but what was done to address the systemic failure, the warped priorities, twisted mindsets, the abhorrent environment that would enable an entire group of people to go along with the deception and sacrifice of a woman in this manner. We don't see members of the Greek army questioning or standing up to the decision. We don't see Artemis taking the opportunity to deliver an inspiring lesson on women's rights. We don't gain confidence that this situation won't repeat because nothing changed. There's no evidence of a mindset level shift nor societal level shift of anything put in place to stop another woman from being discarded for whatever unimportant reason. And it's so easy and perhaps even warranted to focus on this aspect, that rescuing one person does not explain away the rest of the story or magically make it all okay. Certainly this rings true in our world today. Sparing one person from, to give an example, an unreasonable prison sentence doesn't change the fact that so many people are subject to unreasonable sentences. Offering a hot meal to somebody doesn't change our unequal landscape of food and wealth distribution. Spending extra time to explain a concept to one student in a classroom doesn't solve the embedded time and resource constraints that prevent students from learning in general. So that's all very true. But now take the following idea. These systemic injustices that often get better and worse and better and worse and then come back in different costumes may be the backdrop of our lives, but do not have to paralyze us to the extent that we neglect what we can do. Like Artemis, we can always do something, and at the particular moment you're being called to do it, it's going to be enough. I'll give an example I recently encountered. A local homeless shelter that I've worked at had this rule that the residents had to leave the shelter from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., at which point they could come back for dinner and to go to bed. Was it because that ostensibly incentivizes people to find work? Or because there's not enough staff at the shelter? I don't know. It's a maddening and really annoying rule. So one day in January, when it was inexplicably cold outside, more cold than usual, the shift manager at the shelter just said, okay, nobody's leaving. Everybody just stay here. I'll figure it out. So, okay, one could argue that his decision should not be considered an act of kindness. It was the baseline, basic, humane thing to do. One could argue that he shouldn't have had to do it. Nobody should be kicked out of a homeless shelter in the dead of winter, so why isn't that reflected in our protocol from the outset? In every protocol. Why are so many people forced into homelessness? Why is our society a mess? However, in that moment when those residents needed to be kept safe, answering those questions or choosing to focus on those frustrating battles was going to accomplish absolutely nothing, except paralyze us from exercising the power we do have. The bigger global powerlessness does not have to negate the power an individual does maintain, the power any individual can summon and act on. And there's always something when you know to look, which was in this case to leave the shelter open. At that point in time, that group of residents needed to be kept safe, and the larger injustices did not cancel out our ability to help them. As a result, the actions of us, the individuals, went further and had a more powerful effect than, I would argue, the campaigns and discussions that do unfold in our social and political systems. Those policies on housing services were not caught up to what we needed. The status of women in ancient Greece was not caught up to what we needed, yet in both cases, the individual exercised their power, and it was an affront to the inhumanity and futility of those systems. The actions of the individual might not deliver the entire world, but the actions of the individual can effectively give the world to one person, and in the moment, in the situation, that's what's needed. That is enough. That's what unites us with the divine. So now I'd like to hear from you in the comments. Think of an injustice local to you, like in your neighborhood, place of work, or even in your home. In what ways is this injustice indicative of larger societal or global level lapses? So you can answer that, but still, in spite of what you identify, what is one thing you can do that may not solve the whole problem forever, for everyone, but would still make a greater than zero difference to at least one person? Let me know in the comments.